At the restaurant, my brother's wife announced to everyone, "David, go find another table. This one's for family, not adopted guys." They all laughed and agreed. Then the waiter placed a $2,270 bill in front of me for their entire dinner. I smiled, took a sip, and humbly paid the bill. But then I heard a voice. "Just a moment, please." You ever walk into a place and feel like you're immediately too broke to breathe there? That was Belmont's. The kind of restaurant where the water probably has a resume, the breadbasket has a stock portfolio, and the chandeliers? Yeah, they definitely have insurance policies, probably better ones than mine. I sat there at the end of a long mahogany table that looked like it had been stolen from a royal banquet, trying to pretend I belonged, when in reality, I felt like the valet who accidentally wandered into the dining room. And then it happened. Clarissa, my brother's wife, professional social climber, part-time narcissist, and full-time pain in my ass, decided the night needed some entertainment. And by entertainment, I mean me being the punchline. "David," she said, loud enough for half the restaurant to hear, "go find another table. This one's for family, not adopted guys." Boom. There it was. The nuclear strike. And of course, the table erupted like she'd just delivered the greatest stand-up routine of the century. Marcus, my brother, born with a silver spoon and a hollow head, laughed until he snorted. My parents, Gerald and Lillian, joined in too, which was rich considering they're the ones who signed the adoption papers. Even Clarissa's brother-in-law, a man I'm convinced only exists to nod and agree with her, chuckled like a trained hyena in a three-piece suit. I guess my humiliation pairs well with their lobster bisque. I just sat there, swirling my glass of overpriced water, because God forbid we have tap water in a place like this, and smiled. I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of seeing me crack. "Wow," I said in my head. "I've officially been upgraded from black sheep to unpaid waiter." Big night for me. My outward expression didn't flinch, though. You learn early in this family that showing pain is like bleeding in front of sharks. The thing is, this wasn't new. Clarissa had been lobbing these little grenades since day one. At first, it was subtle. Jokes about how I lucked out being adopted into a real family. Then it was passive-aggressive digs about my career, my apartment, my car. Tonight she decided to go full Broadway villain. And everyone was in on the laugh. If I had $1 for every time they've used me as their evening entertainment, I could probably afford a second drink here. The waiter approached with the kind of posture that said he definitely judged my tie. He placed the menus in front of everyone. But when he got to me, he hesitated like he wasn't sure I actually belonged. "Still with this party?" he asked. I nodded. "Barely." He handed me a menu with a look that said, "Good luck paying for this, buddy." Dinner went about as well as you'd expect. Marcus ordered wine he couldn't pronounce but pretended to have opinions on. My dad complained about the presentation of his appetizer, as if he were a Michelin inspector. Clarissa told a story about their vacation in Capri in a voice dripping with the kind of fake modesty that makes you want to hurl your breadstick across the room. Through it all, the jabs kept coming. Little ones. Like mosquito bites designed to test my patience. "So, David," my mom said, swirling her Sauvignon Blanc, "still single? Or are you finally bringing someone to Christmas this year?" "No, Mom," I said with a smile. I figured I'd let Marcus' ego take up all the extra seating again. The table went quiet for a beat. Then Clarissa laughed, that fake, high-pitched laugh people do when they're deciding whether or not to be offended. "He's getting bold," she said, smiling at Marcus. "Must be the adoption trauma." I smiled too, mostly because the alternative was flipping the table. Then came the part of the night they were all really waiting for. The check. It arrived on a sleek leather tray like a piece of evidence in a courtroom. The waiter, with zero hesitation, placed it directly in front of me. Not Marcus, who had ordered enough steak to feed a small army. Not my dad, who thinks the phrase, "I'll cover it," is a personal insult. Not even Clarissa, whose handbag could probably pay off my student loans. Nope, right in front of me. I said aloud, deadpan. My favorite part of family bonding, financial exploitation. Clarissa tilted her head, smiling sweetly, like a python about to swallow something whole. "Well, you're doing so well these days, aren't you, David? Big client, big paycheck? It's just dinner. Just dinner. The total? $2,270. For just dinner." I stared at the bill like it was written in ancient hieroglyphics. I did the math in my head, twice, because surely there was a mistake. There wasn't. Apparently, humiliation comes with a 20% gratuity. My mom waved her hand like a queen dismissing a peasant. Oh, David, you just landed a new client, right? This is nothing. Nothing. $2,000. That's a vacation. That's 6 months of therapy. That's 10,000 gallons of gas. But here, in the land of caviar and condescension, it's nothing. I thought about saying no. I thought about pushing the bill toward Marcus and watching him choke on that dry-aged ribeye. But then I remembered the golden rule of this family. Confrontation never ends well. So I smiled. That tight, practiced smile I'd been perfecting since childhood. Sure, I said, sliding my card onto the tray. Nothing. The waiter whisked it away, and the table returned to its regularly scheduled programming. Laughing, gossiping, ignoring the fact that I was basically being mugged in daylight. I sat back, sipping what was left of my water, and thought, if humiliation had calories, this dinner could fuel a marathon. I zoned out after that. I watched the way Marcus talked with his hands like he was conducting an orchestra no one asked for. I watched my dad lecture the waiter on the importance of wine oration. I even watched Clarissa's jaw move as she explained how her family would never treat someone different as less than. Yes, she actually said that. The irony was so thick I nearly choked on it. And through it all, I felt this strange, familiar numbness creep in. The same one I'd felt at every Thanksgiving dinner when they joked about my adoption. The same one I'd felt at every birthday party where they'd forget to invite anyone on my side of the family. Oh wait, that's right, I don't have a side. It was the numbness of someone who had spent a lifetime being reminded he was lucky to even be here. By the time the check came back, I was ready to leave. My bank account had just flatlined, my dignity had been dragged through the mud, and my family was laughing about dessert options like nothing had happened. I slipped the receipt into my jacket pocket and stood up. Leaving already? Marcus asked, wiping steak juice from his mouth. Yeah, I said. I think my unpaid intern shift is over for the night. They laughed. Of course they laughed. Because in their world, I was always the punchline, the side character, the guy whose suffering was part of the entertainment package. But as I walked toward the exit, something shifted. Maybe it was the sting of Clarissa's words still echoing in my head. Maybe it was the din in my savings account reminding me how much I'd just lost. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the quiet realization that one day, I wouldn't be their joke anymore. Outside, the cool night air slapped me in the face like a wake-up call. Belmont's valet rushed over to open the door, expecting a tip I didn't have. I handed him a few crumpled bills and stood there for a second, staring at the glowing sign above the restaurant. Belmont's, the place where my self-respect went to die. I thought about everything that had just happened. The jokes, the check, the smirks. And for the first time, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I felt curious. Curious about how it would feel when the roles were reversed. When the people laughing now were the ones squirming. When the adopted guy became the only one at the table worth listening to. I didn't know it then, but that dinner would become the beginning of the end for them. The moment the ground started shifting beneath their perfect little world. Because humiliation is a funny thing. It burns, it festers, it lingers, but it also builds pressure. And one day, that pressure explodes. But that's a story for another night. Tonight, I was just the guy who paid $2,270 to be insulted by the people who were supposed to love him. The guy who smiled through the pain because he knew, deep down, that this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the opening act. And oh, they had no idea what was coming next. You know that feeling when you're watching a slow-motion car crash, and you're the car? Yeah, that was me, sitting at Belmont's while my family turned dinner into a performance art piece called, Let's See How Much We Can Make David Pay Before He Snaps. I stared at the receipt in front of me like it was a ransom note, wondering if the kitchen accidentally charged me for the chandelier too. $2,270. For one dinner. I could practically hear my bank account wheezing like it had just run a marathon it didn't train for. And yet, there was Marcus, ordering another bottle of wine he couldn't pronounce and definitely couldn't afford. I watched him swirl it like he was auditioning for Master Sommelier, douchebag edition. This one, he said, squinting at the label, has notes of oak and ambition. Yeah, Marcus, it has notes of bankruptcy and bad decisions. Meanwhile, Clarissa was gnawing on a steak that cost more than my first car. She chewed with that smug look that rich people get when they know they're not paying. Across the table, my dad was chatting about stocks like he wasn't wearing a tie he bought on clearance, and my mom was doing her Queen of the Castle wave, dismissing the waiter with the grace of someone who's never had to balance a checkbook. "Oh, David," she said, with that tone that always means something awful is coming. "You just landed a new client, right? This is nothing for you." Nothing. That's what they called it. A dinner that cost the equivalent of a used Honda Civic was nothing. Meanwhile, I was mentally calculating which organs fetched the best price on the black market. I plastered on my usual smile, the one that says I'm dying inside but too polite to make a scene, and swirled what was left of my $12 glass of tap water. "Sure, Mom," I said. "It's just money. Who needs it anyway? Overrated." Inside, I was screaming. Out loud, I was cracking jokes. Because in this family, sarcasm is the only currency I have that they can't overdraw. The table roared with laughter about something Marcus said, something about how people like me never understand wealth management. I didn't even catch the whole comment. I was too busy picturing a future where I lived under a bridge with a cardboard sign that read, "We'll audit your taxes for food." And then it happened. Just as the check was about to leave my trembling hands and my savings account was preparing to flatline, a voice cut through the noise like a scalpel. "Just a moment, please." Everything stopped. Forks froze midair. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the waiter, who up until now had been silently judging my suit, paused. Because that voice belonged to one person. Grandma Eleanor. Now, you have to understand something about Grandma Eleanor. She's not just old. She's vintage. 78, still sharper than a tax attorney during audit season, and about as intimidating as a federal subpoena. She's the only person in the family who remembers my birthday without Facebook reminding her. The only one who ever asks how I'm actually doing instead of how much I'm billing. And when she speaks, even chandeliers listen. "Are you all quite finished?" she asked, her tone colder than the chilled champagne they'd just ordered. The table went silent. Clarissa's face froze mid-smirk. My mom put down her wine. Marcus suddenly found the salt shaker fascinating. Grandma stood up, slow and deliberate, like a judge about to deliver a death sentence. "I have been sitting here," she said, "listening to you all mock and belittle David as if cruelty were a family tradition." "Grandma, we were just joking," Marcus started, but she raised one hand, and he shut up so fast you'd think she had a remote control for his vocal cords. "No," she said, "this isn't joking. This is cruelty dressed up as humor. And frankly, I'm disgusted." The silence was so heavy, you could have heard a souffle deflate. I sat there, trying to process what was happening. Grandma had defended me before, sure, but this was different. This was surgical. She was cutting them open with every word. "For years," she continued, "I've watched all of you treat David like an outsider. You've mocked him for being adopted. You've taken advantage of his kindness. You've expected him to pay, both emotionally and financially, for the privilege of being part of this family." Clarissa shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "That's not fair." "Oh, I'm sorry," Grandma snapped. "Would you like me to read the transcripts of your insults?" "Because I have an excellent memory." I was trying not to smile, but it was hard. This was the first time anyone had called them out, really called them out. It was like watching a courtroom drama, except the defendant was my family and the prosecutor was a 78-year-old woman with zero tolerance for bullshit. "And now," Grandma said, turning toward me, "you expect David to pay for this entire meal. Again, as if humiliating him wasn't enough, you also want to empty his wallet." "Mom, it's not like that," my dad muttered. "Really?" she said, arching an eyebrow. "Then why is the check sitting in front of him? Why isn't Marcus, with his fancy new car, reaching for it? Why isn't Gerald, with his stock portfolio, offering to cover his son's dinner?" You could feel the guilt creeping around the table like secondhand smoke. My dad cleared his throat. My mom stared at her napkin. Clarissa pretended to check something on her phone. Then Grandma looked at me. "David, dear," she said gently, "put your card away." I blinked. "What?" "You heard me," she said. "Put it away. You've paid enough for this family already." I didn't know what to say. For the first time in forever, someone was on my side, and not just anyone. She was. The waiter returned, still holding the check, and Grandma plucked it from his hand with a polite smile. "I'll be covering this tonight." "Oh, you don't have to," I started. "I know I don't have to," she interrupted. But I want to. And besides, she glanced around the table, her eyes sharp as a blade. I have a feeling none of these freeloaders brought their wallets anyway. I laughed. Out loud. Like a real laugh. The kind that bubbles up from a place you didn't even know was still alive. Marcus shot me a glare. Clarissa pursed her lips. My mother looked like she was trying to calculate how fast she could disappear. But Grandma wasn't done. Oh no, she wasn't even close. Also, she said, folding her napkin with surgical precision, I have an announcement to make. Oh, Grandma never announced anything. This was about to be big. Effective immediately, she said. I've made some changes to my estate planning. The room shifted. My dad sat up straighter. My mom's eyes widened. Marcus suddenly looked like he'd seen a ghost. What kind of changes? My mom asked carefully. Oh, nothing dramatic, Grandma said, sipping her tea. Just a complete restructuring of my will. Every cent, every property, every investment will go to David. The silence that followed was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It was the kind of silence that happens right before a bomb goes off. And make no mistake, Grandma had just dropped one. Clarissa choked on her $80 creme brulee. Marcus dropped his spoon. My dad looked like someone had repossessed his soul. My mom's mouth opened and closed like a confused goldfish. I just sat there, frozen. My brain was trying to reboot. Wait, what? All of it? Mom, Marcus finally croaked. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm very serious, Grandma said. You've all shown me exactly how you value family, and David is the only one who's ever treated me like more than a bank account. Consider this my way of returning the favor. Clarissa tried to recover. But he's not even blood. Neither is your spray tan, Grandma snapped. And yet here we are. I nearly spit out my water. The rest of the table dissolved into chaos, voices overlapping, accusations flying. Everyone suddenly desperate to rewrite the evening's events. But none of it mattered. The decision had been made. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being laughed at. I was the one holding all the cards. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a strange, warm satisfaction spread through my chest. I wasn't sure if I'd just become Batman or if this was what winning the lottery felt like. But either way, it felt damn good. I looked at Grandma, and she gave me a small, knowing smile. You're the only one who's ever truly been family, she said. And for once, just once, I believed her. There are moments in life that split everything into before and after. Before, I was the family's favorite chew toy. Good enough to mock, dependable enough to milk for money, and invisible enough to forget when the camera flash went off. After? Well, after started the second Grandma Eleanor cleared her throat like she was about to narrate the 10 Commandments. And let me tell you, God himself would have shut up to listen. Grandma had always been the quiet observer in our dysfunctional little circus. She'd sit at these dinners, smiling politely while Clarissa launched verbal grenades, while Marcus flexed his mediocrity like a peacock in loafers, while my parents pretended they didn't hear the jokes that were very much about me. But tonight she wasn't here for polite smiles. Tonight, Grandma Eleanor had taken off her silk gloves, metaphorically, of course, because she would never actually take them off in public, and she was ready to throw punches. Do you all realize how absolutely vile you've been? She asked, her voice cutting through the silence like a diamond through glass. The table froze. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Even Clarissa, queen of unsolicited commentary, suddenly found her creme brulee deeply fascinating. For years, Grandma continued, her tone deceptively calm, I've sat here and watched you treat David like an outsider. Like he's lucky to even have a seat at this table. Like being part of this family is some kind of charity project. She shifted her gaze to Marcus, and I swear my brother, 6 feet tall, gym rat, self-proclaimed alpha, shrank 2 inches in his chair. Marcus, she said, do you think I don't hear the way you talk to him? The condescension? The jokes about him not being real family. Marcus opened his mouth, probably to lie through his perfect veneers, but Grandma raised one hand. Don't bother. I've heard every word. Then she turned to my parents. And you too, she said, and even I winced. You should be ashamed. You raised these boys. You signed the adoption papers. You made a commitment to love and protect David. And instead, you've let him become the family punching bag. Mom, my father started weakly. You're exaggerating. Exaggerating? She snapped. You let your daughter-in-law tell your son to leave the table because he's adopted. You laughed. You all laughed. And now you're content to let him pay for a dinner that most of you couldn't afford on your own. Tell me, Gerald, is that what family means to you? The silence that followed was suffocating. It was the kind of silence that makes you hyper-aware of every heartbeat, every swallow, every shallow breath. And then Grandma did something none of us saw coming. She placed her napkin neatly beside her plate, folded her hands on the table, and said the words that detonated a bomb in the middle of Belmont's. I've changed my will. You could have heard a truffle fall on the floor. Every pair of eyes at that table snapped to her. My mom blinked. My dad's face drained of color. Marcus's jaw actually dropped, which was impressive considering the man usually only opened his mouth to talk about himself. Clarissa broke the silence first. I'm sorry, what? Grandma sipped her tea, unbothered. You heard me. Every dollar, every property, every share, bond, and investment. All of it. It's going to David. Time. Stopped. Clarissa's spoon slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the table. Marcus's wine glass froze halfway to his mouth. My father stared at Grandma like she'd just announced she was selling the family to Elon Musk. My mother made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a dying bird. And me? I just sat there, frozen, like my brain was buffering. I replayed the words in my head. Every dollar, every property, every investment. All of it. To David. Wait, all of it. Marcus finally stammered, like maybe if he said it out loud it would sound less horrifying. Yes, dear, Grandma said sweetly. All of it. You can't be serious, Clarissa sputtered. Oh, I'm very serious, Grandma replied. I've had months to think about this. And the conclusion I came to is quite simple. None of you deserve a cent. Except David. The silence was so thick you could have sliced it with a steak knife. Preferably the same one Clarissa had been using to butcher that $200 fillet. But why him? Marcus demanded, the mask of polite confusion slipping into full-on outrage. He's not even blood. Grandma turned her gaze on him, and for the first time in his life, my brother looked like a little boy caught stealing from the cookie jar. No, she said, he's not blood. He's better. He's loyal. He's kind. He's never treated me like an ATM. He calls me on my birthday. He visits just to see how I'm doing, not to ask for a favor. Then she looked at me, and her expression softened. David, she said, you've always been the only one who cared about me, not my money. You've shown me more love than all of them combined, and I will not let that go unrewarded. I felt my throat tighten. I wanted to say something, anything, but words had left the building. All I could do was sit there, wide-eyed, while the rest of the table collectively lost their minds. This is insane, my dad said, his voice rising. We're your family. No, Grandma said coldly. You're my disappointment. Ouch. And she said it so casually, too, like she was commenting on the weather. This isn't fair. Clarissa shrieked. You can't just cut us out like that. I can do whatever I damn well please with my money, Grandma said, dabbing her lips with her napkin. And if you're concerned about fairness, perhaps you should have considered that before humiliating David every chance you got. Marcus was red now, part anger, part panic. We've been there for you, Mom. We've taken care of you. Grandma let out a laugh, not a warm, grandmotherly chuckle. No, this was a dark, guttural, you're about to regret your life choices kind of laugh. Taken care of me? Marcus, the last time you visited was because you wanted me to co-sign a loan. Clarissa only calls when she's trying to sell me essential oils. And Gerald, she turned to my father. You haven't asked how I'm feeling in years. But David? David shows up with groceries. David fixes the leaky faucet without being asked. David doesn't treat me like a walking trust fund. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to stop myself from grinning. Because deep down, some petty, wounded part of me was absolutely loving this. My mom tried a different tactic. Mom, please, she said, suddenly soft-spoken. You're emotional right now. Let's not make any rash decisions. Rash decisions? Grandma tilted her head. I made this decision 6 months ago. Silence. Again. That heavy, devastating silence. Clarissa looked like she might cry. Though, to be fair, it was probably over the lost vacation home, not the emotional betrayal. Marcus was pale. My dad was sweating. And I was trying not to pass out. Because this was not how I expected my night to go. When I walked into Belmont's, I was the family joke. The adopted kid. The designated wallet. the convenient target. But now I was the heir to everything. I glanced at Grandma. She smiled at me, a small, knowing smile that said, "I see you. I always have." For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the outsider. I didn't feel like the unwanted kid they'd done a favor for. I felt chosen, seen, loved. And judging by the looks on their faces, my family hated every second of it. Clarissa was the first to break the silence again. "Well," she said, her voice trembling but laced with venom, "I hope you're happy, David." I raised my glass of water and gave her the most deadpan smile I could muster. "Happier than I've ever been." Marcus muttered something under his breath about manipulation and taking advantage, but I barely heard him. Because in that moment, I realized something profound. They weren't angry because Grandma had given me everything. They were angry because, for once, they had nothing. No leverage, no control, no power over me. The dinner ended soon after that. No one ordered dessert. No one said goodbye. My parents left in a huff. Marcus stormed out, and Clarissa stomped off muttering about legal options. It was glorious. As I walked Grandma out to the car, she slipped her arm into mine and said, "Don't let them make you feel guilty for this. You earned every bit of it." "Grandma," I said, shaking my head, "I didn't earn anything. You didn't have to." "I wanted to," she interrupted, "because you're the only one who ever made me feel like family." We stood there in the soft glow of the restaurant lights, and I realized my life had just changed forever. No more tiptoeing around their insults. No more paying for their sins. No more being the outsider. For once, I wasn't the punchline. For once, I was the story. And oh, what a story it was going to be. You know that thing where you think the night can't possibly get any more chaotic, and then life looks you dead in the eye and says, "Hold my beer"? Yeah, that was Belmont's, round two. I'd just barely processed the fact that Grandma Eleanor had nuked the family inheritance like a Cold War-era bomb, and I was still watching the fallout settle when she decided to lob another grenade into the room. And this one was aimed right at the foundation of everything I thought I knew about my life. She leaned forward, resting her hands on the table with that terrifying calm only people over 70 and Supreme Court justices have mastered. "There's one more thing," she said. "Oh, good." Because the first bombshell hadn't been enough. The entire table froze again. My mother's wine glass was halfway to her lips. My father was pretending to read the dessert menu, even though I'm pretty sure he was having a minor heart attack. Clarissa stopped pouting just long enough to glance nervously at Marcus, whose face was already turning the color of undercooked chicken. "What now?" Marcus muttered. "She's giving him the moon?" Grandma ignored him. Her eyes were locked on me. "David," she said gently, "I think it's time you knew the truth about your adoption." I blinked. "The truth?" She nodded. "The part they never told you." Oh boy, those words never lead anywhere good. "Okay," I said slowly, "hit me." And she did. Like a truck. "When you were 5, she began, your birth parents passed away. It was tragic, but they'd been prepared. They left behind a trust, $600,000, meant solely for you. For your education, your care, your future. That money was intended to ensure you'd have every opportunity in life." I felt my stomach knot, but I didn't say anything. Because I knew that tone. That careful, measured tone meant there was a but coming, and oh, was it a big one. "But," she continued, "Gerald and Lillian. That's my mom and dad, in case you're keeping score, took control of the trust when they adopted you. And instead of using it for you, they spent it." "Spent it," I repeated, my voice sounding far away even to me. "Yes," she said softly. "Marcus was enrolled in a private school. Clarissa went on expensive spa retreats. Your parents bought new cars, remodeled the house, traveled to Europe. And you got hand-me-downs and a college savings account with barely enough for textbooks." The silence that followed was unlike anything I'd ever felt. It wasn't just quiet, it was heavy, suffocating, like the room itself was holding its breath. I sat there staring at the polished wood of the table, trying to process the words that had just detonated my entire childhood. $600,000. All. I was a bankroll. I thought back to every family vacation I wasn't invited to because money was tight. Every time I was told I had to earn my place. Every passive-aggressive reminder of how lucky I was to have them. And suddenly, the puzzle pieces all clicked into place. It was never about love. It was about leverage. "You know," I said finally, It's funny. I spent my whole life thinking I was the outsider. Turns out, I was the only one who actually belonged here. The rest of you? You were just cashing checks. Clarissa rolled her eyes. Oh, please. It's ancient history. Are you really going to hold a grudge over money spent 25 years ago? I turned to her, smiling the kind of smile that usually precedes bad decisions. Clarissa, if someone stole $600,000 from you, would you call that ancient history? Or would you call the damn police? Her lips tightened, and for once, she didn't have a comeback. David, my father said again, we can make it right. Make it right. I repeated, shaking my head. You can't. That money's gone. My childhood's gone. The chance to feel like I actually mattered, gone. You don't make that right. I wasn't even angry anymore. Anger had burned off. What was left was colder, sharper, a kind of clarity I hadn't felt before. Because this wasn't just betrayal. It was theft. And it wasn't just money they'd taken. It was trust, identity, dignity. Grandma placed a hand on mine. You understand now, don't you? She asked quietly. Why I did what I did. I nodded. I understood more than she could know. The inheritance, the estate, all of it. It wasn't just about punishing them. It was about restoring balance. About giving me back something I should have had all along. Power. The table sat in silence. My parents whispered to each other. Marcus stared at the floor. Clarissa picked at her nails. And for once, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel lesser. I didn't feel like the adopted kid who should be grateful for scraps. I felt dangerous. David, my mom said finally, tears streaming down her face. Please, we're still your family. I looked at her for a long moment before replying. Are you? I asked. Because families don't rob their kids blind and then laugh at them for being poor. The silence that followed was delicious. When we finally stood to leave, no one spoke. No hugs. No see you soon. Just the sound of chairs scraping against polished floors and a family too ashamed to look me in the eye. As I walked out of Belmont's that night, I felt the weight of something heavy lift off my shoulders. For the first time, I wasn't defined by what they did to me. I wasn't the charity case. I wasn't the outsider. I was the man they'd underestimated, the man they'd used, and now, the man who held all the cards. They'd taken $600,000 from me. They'd turned my childhood into a discount store version of theirs. But that was okay, because now, I was holding a check they could never cash, one written in justice, karma, and poetic damnation. And trust me, I intended to make every cent of it worth their while. You ever wake up and realize your family drama has graduated from embarrassing Thanksgiving story to headline-grabbing dumpster fire? Because that's where I was the morning after Belmont's. I rolled over, checked my phone, and there it was, a news alert with my name in bold letters like I was a celebrity who'd just shaved my head in public. Billionaire grandma disowns family for adopted grandson. Family fortune upended over $2,270 dinner bill. Adopted son inherits it all, relatives furious. I stared at the screen, blinking like I'd just been hit with a flashbang. Well, I muttered to myself, there goes my chance of ever walking into a grocery store unnoticed again. It's wild how fast a family meltdown can go viral. One night you're the guy footing the bill for a dinner you didn't want to be at, and the next morning, strangers on the internet are debating whether you're a hero or a heartless gold digger. Spoiler alert, they were very divided. Half of Twitter was calling me Saint David, the symbol of justice for mistreated adoptees everywhere. The other half, oh, they were dragging me harder than my credit card after that dinner. Manipulative, opportunistic, playing the long game for the inheritance, as if I had some master plan since age 5, like, yes, one day I shall claim it all. But first, let me learn how to tie my shoes. And it wasn't just social media. Oh no. Every gossip site, financial magazine, and morning talk show had me on blast. I was trending on TikTok under #AdoptionDynasty. Some guy even made a parody song about it called Lobster Bisque and Bloodlines. Catchy, unfortunately. The reporters were the worst. They camped outside my apartment like raccoons waiting for trash day. I couldn't even step outside to grab my mail without some guy in a cheap suit yelling, David, did you manipulate your grandmother into cutting out the rest of your family? I wanted to yell back, dude, I can't even manipulate a vending machine into giving me my chips. What makes you think I orchestrated a multi-million-dollar estate plan? But instead, I just smiled, waved, and went back inside before someone decided to throw a microphone at me. It got worse. They tracked down old neighbors, former classmates, even my third-grade teacher. All of them giving interviews about how I was quiet, kind, or always seemed like he was trying to prove himself. One guy I barely remembered from high school posted on Facebook, "I always knew David was destined for greatness," which was hilarious because I distinctly remembered him calling me foster freak in gym class. Funny how memory works when someone suddenly inherits a fortune. Meanwhile, my inbox exploded. TV producers wanted me on their shows. Magazines wanted exclusive interviews. One talk show offered to fly me first class to New York to tell my side of the story. My side. As if there was a version of this story where I didn't get publicly humiliated over lobster and then find out I was the victim of a six-figure heist at age 5. I ignored most of it, but I did respond to one reporter who asked if I had influenced my grandmother. "No," I wrote back. "The only thing I've ever successfully influenced is a Google document." They printed that. Front page. Apparently, sarcasm sells better than sincerity. While the media was busy turning my life into a Netflix docuseries, my family was doing what they do best, panicking. Marcus tried calling me 17 times in one day. I ignored all of them. Then he started leaving voicemails that ranged from angry to pleading. "You're ruining the family name," one said. "We can fix this together," said another. My personal favorite? "Clarissa is crying every night." I considered that a bonus. Then came the lawyers. Because of course they did. My parents hired some high-powered firm to challenge the will, claiming Grandma Eleanor was unduly influenced. Clarissa, ever the drama queen, told the press I'd brainwashed an elderly woman, which was news to me because the last time I tried to convince Grandma to do something, specifically to stop watching Wheel of Fortune on maximum volume, I'd failed spectacularly. The lawsuit was predictable. Pathetic, but predictable. They claimed I'd manipulated Grandma's emotions. They said I'd turned her against them. They even tried to argue that I'd isolated her, which was rich, considering they couldn't be bothered to visit her unless it involved signing a check. When a journalist shoved a microphone in my face and asked how I felt about being accused of elder abuse, I deadpanned. If convincing Grandma to stop overfeeding her cat counts as manipulation, then yeah, I guess I'm guilty. The clip went viral. People started making memes of it. My face was suddenly everywhere, on t-shirts, coffee mugs, even a TikTok filter that put my quote in a speech bubble over your head. But while the world was laughing, my family was seething. They released a joint statement calling me a fraud and a disgrace. They said I'd destroyed the family. I almost choked on my cereal when I read that. Destroyed the family? Oh no, sweethearts, you did that all on your own. I just showed up with popcorn. It wasn't all bad, though. Some of the messages I got were from adoptees who'd been treated like second-class citizens by their own families. They told me my story gave them hope. One guy wrote, "Thank you for proving that blood isn't everything." Another said, "I wish I had a Grandma Eleanor in my corner." Those messages? Those meant something. They reminded me that this wasn't just about money or revenge. It was about justice, and maybe even healing. Still, I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy watching my family squirm. Their social circle, the one they'd built on money, appearances, and mutual self-congratulation, turned on them overnight. My parents' country club membership was reviewed. Marcus's business reconsidered partnerships. And Clarissa? She got uninvited from a charity gala she'd been bragging about for months. I told you, karma may take her time, but when she shows up, she brings snacks. Of course, they didn't stop trying to spin the narrative. Clarissa did an interview where she cried, on national television, saying, "We always treated David like one of us." Which was funny, considering one of us apparently meant wallet and family clown. The interviewer asked her about the adoption trust, and she suddenly had no comment. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. Then there was Marcus, who claimed on a podcast that Grandma wasn't in her right mind. The host asked if he had any proof of that, and Marcus responded, "Well, she once forgot my birthday." Yeah, buddy. Totally the same as rewriting her will out of confusion. By the end of the week, the situation had gone from family drama to full-blown public soap opera. People were taking sides like it was a Super Bowl. Hashtags were trending. TikTok therapists were making videos analyzing our toxic family dynamic. A late-night host even joked, "You know your family's messed up when the waiter serves you a subpoena with dessert." And through it all, I did what I always do. I made jokes. Because that's how I survive. That's how I've always survived. Sarcasm has been my armor since the day they made me feel like an outsider. And now, that armor was bulletproof. One night, I was scrolling through yet another article about myself. Meet the man who brought a dynasty to its knees, when Grandma called. They're making quite the fuss, aren't they? She said, amused. You could say that, I replied. I'm thinking of charging them rent for living in my headlines. She chuckled. Don't let them rattle you. People who are guilty always scream the loudest. I know, I said. It's just weird. I never asked for any of this. I know you didn't, she said gently. But maybe that's why you deserve it. I sat there in silence for a moment, letting her words sink in. Because she was right, I never asked for this. I never schemed or plotted or manipulated. All I ever wanted was to be treated like I belonged. And if it took a public scandal to finally get there, so be it. By the end of the month, the story started to cool off, at least in the headlines. But the damage was done. My family's reputation was in ruins. They were the villains of the story, and I was the guy who'd finally said enough. And maybe that was the best part of all. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the punchline. I wasn't the adopted kid or the outsider. I was the one they couldn't silence, the one they couldn't control. And if they hated me for it, good, because I was just getting started. If you'd told me a year ago that my family drama would end up in an actual courtroom, I would have laughed, poured myself a drink, and said, sure, and maybe pigs will start flying coach too. Yet there I was, standing in front of the county courthouse, wearing my best. I'm totally calm and not secretly praying for divine intervention suit, about to watch my family try to sue me for inheriting money I didn't even ask for. Welcome to the Comedy Central Roast of David, Legal Edition. The headlines had already done their job. The courtroom was packed, reporters, photographers, people who clearly had no idea who we were, but had decided this was their free entertainment for the week. One guy even brought popcorn. Popcorn. That's how ridiculous my life had become. Strangers were now literally snacking on my family dysfunction. I spotted them across the room, my parents, Marcus, and Clarissa, sitting together like they were posing for a World's Worst People album cover. Marcus looked like someone had stolen his lunch money. My dad wore his usual smug, trust me, I know better face. My mom was already dabbing her eyes with a tissue, probably rehearsing her victim monologue. And Clarissa? She had her sunglasses on indoors, like she was about to testify at a Senate hearing. If drama was a sport, she'd have an Olympic medal. Ready? Walter asked, stepping up beside me. Walter was my lawyer, mid-50s, dry sense of humor, and a mind sharp enough to slice through steel. If Perry Mason and a wrecking ball had a baby, it would be him. Remember, he said, adjusting his tie, we don't have to win them over. We just have to let them embarrass themselves. Should I hand them a microphone? I muttered. He grinned. They brought their own. The bailiff called the courtroom to order, and we all stood as Judge McAllister entered. An older man with the permanent expression of someone who's seen too much stupidity in his career. He gave us all a once-over, sighed deeply, and said, let's get this over with. First up, my family's lawyer. A slick, tan guy with a voice that sounded like it was permanently stuck in salesman mode. Your Honor, he began dramatically. This is a case of undue influence. A vulnerable elderly woman manipulated into rewriting her will by a cunning and opportunistic man. I leaned over to Walter and whispered, are we sure he's not auditioning for a soap opera? Give it a minute, Walter whispered back. He'll start crying soon. The lawyer strutted around the courtroom like he was giving a TED Talk. He painted me as a scheming mastermind, some Machiavellian puppet master who had spent years worming my way into Grandma Eleanor's good graces just to get my hands on her money. Which, honestly, was hilarious. If anyone had spent years worming their way into her will, it was them, with their fake smiles and carefully timed phone calls. Then he called his first witness, my mother. She shuffled to the stand with the performance of a lifetime. We're heartbroken, she sniffled. David has always been different. But we never thought he'd do something like this. Different. Translation, not ours. And yeah, lady, I am different, mainly because I don't siphon adoption money meant for a 5-year-old and then act like I'm the victim. My father was next. We were blindsided, he said, pretending to choke up. We had no idea she'd made these changes. Clearly, David had been influencing her decisions. Influencing, I muttered. I couldn't even influence her to stop calling TV remotes clickers. Then it was Marcus's turn, and oh boy, he came in hot. Look, I love my brother, he began, which was already a lie. But it's obvious he's been manipulating Grandma. Suddenly, he's spending more time with her. Suddenly, she's changing her will. It doesn't add up. I almost raised my hand to object on the grounds of pure stupidity, but Walter squeezed my arm. Let him talk, he whispered. He's digging the hole for us. Clarissa was last. And because she's Clarissa, she brought enough drama to qualify as a one-woman Broadway show. He isolated her from us, she wailed. He poisoned her against the family. I glanced over at Grandma Eleanor, sitting in her wheelchair, calm as ever, sipping her tea like this was an afternoon book club. Poisoned you against them? I whispered to her when the recess bell rang. She smirked. I didn't need help with that. Then it was Walter's turn. And let me tell you, if their lawyer had been a cheap TV drama, Walter was a full-blown courtroom thriller. He stood up slowly, walked to the center of the room, and in that smooth, deliberate tone of his, said, Your Honor, the only undue influence here is the audacity of this family trying to rewrite history. He started with the adoption trust. Oh yes, that little $600,000 secret. We have bank records showing that Gerald and Lillian drained the trust meant for David's education and well-being, spending it on vacations, private schools, and luxury items. He handed over the evidence like it was a mic drop, and I swear the judge's eyebrow went so high I thought it might detach from his forehead. Next, he presented Grandma's medical records, proof she was of completely sound mind when she updated her will. Sharp as ever, her doctor had written. No signs of cognitive decline. That one landed like a knockout punch. Then came the piece de resistance, the video. Oh, the glorious, stupid, self-incriminating video. Clarissa had apparently been caught on camera during one of her wine-fueled brunches, bragging to her friends about how they had earned Grandma's money by raising me. I mean, he should be grateful, she said on tape, slurring slightly. We practically raised him for the payout. It's like child-rearing with a return on investment. The courtroom gasped. My jaw actually dropped. Marcus's face went sheet white. My mother closed her eyes like she was trying to astral project herself out of the room. Even the judge leaned forward and said, Play that again. Walter obliged. Twice. By the time he finished his presentation, their case was deader than my dating life after that one disastrous Hinge date where the girl brought her cat. Their lawyer looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. My family looked like they were attending their own funeral. And me? I was trying so hard not to smile. Judge McAllister shuffled some papers, then looked up, clearly unimpressed. I've been on the bench for 27 years, he said slowly, and I don't think I've ever seen a case this ridiculous. Clarissa whimpered. Marcus sank lower in his seat. My dad cleared his throat like maybe he could cough up a better argument. The evidence is clear, the judge continued. There was no undue influence. Mrs. Eleanor was fully capable of making her own decisions. The defendant's behavior, on the other hand, shows a disturbing pattern of financial exploitation and entitlement. I almost applauded. He slammed the gavel. Case dismissed. The will stands. Furthermore, restitution of the misused trust funds will be ordered. Boom. Done. Over. Just like that. Years of their scheming, entitlement, and manipulation blown to bits in one afternoon. It was beautiful. I glanced over at them one last time. Marcus stared at me with a mix of rage and disbelief. Clarissa was crying again, ugly crying this time, mascara streaking down her face like a bad abstract painting. My parents refused to look at me at all. And Grandma? She winked. Outside, the reporters were waiting again. Microphones, flashing cameras, people shouting questions. David, how does it feel to win? I thought about the bill they'd made me pay. The insults. The stolen trust. The lifetime of jokes at my expense. Then I thought about Grandma sitting beside me, victorious and unbothered. It feels, I said with a smirk, like I should finally order dessert. The crowd laughed, the cameras flashed, and for once, I wasn't the story's victim. I wasn't the punchline. I was the headline. We stepped onto the courthouse steps, and Walter clapped me on the shoulder. Told you they'd embarrass themselves. They sure did, I said. And the best part? I didn't even have to try. As Grandma's driver pulled up to take her home, she looked at me and said, I think a celebration is in order. Dinner? I asked. Preferably one I don't pay for this time. She chuckled. Dinner's on me, dear. You've already paid enough. And as I helped her into the car, I realized something. This wasn't just about money anymore. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about closure. About finally standing on equal footing with the people who'd spent their lives trying to keep me beneath them. About knowing that, when faced with the truth, their lies couldn't stand a chance. Justice had been served, with a side of poetic irony. And damn, it tasted better than any lobster bisque Belmont's ever made. There's this weird thing about winning. No one ever tells you how bittersweet it feels when the confetti finally settles. After the courtroom circus, I should have been on top of the world. I'd just legally slapped the people who spent decades treating me like a second-rate family member, and the universe had finally said, yeah, kid, you were right. But instead of basking in the victory, I found myself sitting at Grandma Eleanor's bedside, watching the strongest woman I've ever known fade like the last light before sunset. Hospitals have a smell, you know the one. That sterile, metallic tang that clings to your clothes and makes you feel like you're stuck inside a can of disinfectant. I hated it. Eleanor hated it too. She used to say, if I ever end up in one of those places, sneak me out and take me to a diner. At least I want my last breath to smell like pancakes. But here we were anyway, me in a chair beside her propped up on pillows, the steady beep of a heart monitor filling the silence between us. Don't look so dramatic, she said one afternoon, her voice a whisper but still sharp as ever. I'm not dead yet. I smirked. Well, I was going for concerned grandson, but sure, dramatic works too. She chuckled, a dry, raspy sound that still managed to be full of life. You always did have a flair for theatrics. Must run in the family. I raised an eyebrow. I thought you said I was the only one worth claiming. She smiled, her eyes twinkling with that same mix of mischief and wisdom that had terrified my father in the courtroom. Touché. We sat like that for hours sometimes. No words, no small talk, just presence. She'd sip her tea, which the nurses pretended not to notice she smuggled in. And I'd read to her from whatever book she was pretending to be interested in. Mostly, though, we talked. About life. About the past. About everything that came after the mess we'd survived. Do you regret it? I asked one evening as the sun dipped low outside her window. The will. All of this. Not for a second, she said. If anything, I regret not doing it sooner. Maybe then they would have learned the value of people instead of dollars. I sighed, leaning back in the uncomfortable hospital chair. They're furious, you know. Still trying to spin the story. Still blaming me. Let them, she said, brushing the thought away with a wave of her hand. They've spent their entire lives blaming others for their own failures. It's the only thing they're consistent at. Her words should have made me laugh, but they didn't. Because beneath the sarcasm and the satisfaction of victory was a creeping fear, a reality I wasn't ready to face. Eleanor was dying. And no amount of money, no amount of courtroom wins, no amount of poetic justice could change that. She must have sensed it because she reached out and took my hand, her skin paper thin but still warm. Don't look at me like that, she whispered. I'm not afraid. Yeah, well, I am, I admitted. Of what? Death. No, I said. Of a world without you in it. She smiled sadly. Oh, David, I've been preparing you for that world since the day you walked into my life. I swallowed hard. You're the only one who ever saw me. And now you'll see yourself, she said. That's the trick. People like your parents. They only know how to define others by what they can take from them. But you? You've always known how to define yourself by what you give. We didn't speak after that for a long time. I just sat there, holding her hand, memorizing the way she looked in the fading light. Regal even in a hospital gown. Fierce even with an oxygen tube in her nose. She was the matriarch, the warrior, the queen. And she was slipping away. Days turned into weeks. The tabloids moved on to the next scandal. My family stopped calling. And I stayed. Every day, every hour I could spare. I listened to her stories. Stories about growing up during the war, about falling in love with my grandfather, about the first time she held me as a baby and knew, without a doubt, that I was meant to be hers. One night, she asked me to bring her a box from her home, an old wooden chest she kept in the back of her closet. Inside were letters, dozens of them, handwritten notes to people she'd helped over the years, former students, charity recipients, distant relatives. Each one thanking her for something she'd done, big or small. You've done so much, I said, flipping through them. You've changed so many lives. She shrugged. I tried. But there's one more thing I need you to do. I looked up. Name it. I want you to build something, she said. A foundation. A place for kids like you. Kids who were adopted, abandoned, forgotten. Give them the tools to build their futures. Give them what you were denied. I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. I will. Promise me, she said, gripping my hand weakly. I promise. She smiled. Good. Then I can go in peace. I wanted to tell her she wasn't going anywhere. I wanted to lie and say we had more time. But we both knew better. So instead, I held her hand tighter and said, I'll make you proud. You already have, she whispered. A few weeks later, she was gone. She passed quietly, in her sleep, holding my hand. There were no dramatic final words, no cinematic goodbye. Just a soft sigh, a peaceful smile, and the stillness that follows a life fully lived. The funeral was complicated. My family showed up, of course, not out of love or grief, but out of obligation and maybe a sliver of hope that the will had somehow changed again. It hadn't. The lawyers made sure of that. They stood at the back, whispering among themselves, while I stood by the casket, numb but steady. People came from all over, people whose lives she'd touched, people I'd never met, but who hugged me like family. They told me stories about the scholarships she'd funded, the homes she'd helped build, the lives she'd saved. And every single one of them said the same thing. She was extraordinary. They were right. She was. When the service ended and the crowd dispersed, I stayed behind. Just me, her, and the wind rustling through the trees. You did it, Grandma, I whispered, staring at the polished wood of the casket. You built something that lasts. I don't know how long I stood there, minutes, hours, but eventually, I felt something shift. The grief didn't go away, but it stopped suffocating me. It became part of me. A weight I'd carry, sure, but one that would keep me grounded rather than hold me back. I left the cemetery that day with two things: her ring on my finger and her mission in my heart. And even though she was gone, I felt her everywhere, in the decisions I made, the people I helped, the man I was becoming. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the city skyline. For the first time in years, I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't the adopted kid trying to prove he belonged. I was David, grandson of Eleanor, heir to her legacy, and the man she believed I could be. Her words echoed in my mind. You're the real family. And maybe for the first time in my life, I finally believed it. The next morning, I got to work. I called lawyers. I met with accountants. I talked to architects and program directors. Piece by piece, I began to build the thing she'd dreamed of, not just an organization, but a lifeline for kids like me. And every step of the way, I felt her hand on my shoulder, guiding me, pushing me forward. The victory in court had felt good, sure. The headlines were satisfying. The justice was sweet. But this was something deeper, something real. This was legacy. And it wasn't just hers anymore. It was ours. And if there's one thing I know for sure, it's this. She may have left this world, but Queen Eleanor didn't really go anywhere. Because everything I am, everything I will become, carries her name. Here's the thing about suddenly being worth more than the GDP of a small country. People expect you to change. They assume you'll start wearing velvet robes and buying pet tigers or flying to brunch in a private jet, because why not? They think money will flip a switch inside you that says, congratulations, you're now officially an asshole. And maybe that happens to some people, but not to me. I'd had enough of greed for one lifetime. My family was a cautionary tale of what happens when money owns you. I wanted to flip that script. I didn't want to own money. I wanted to use it. So no, I didn't buy Ferraris or fill my bathtub with champagne. I didn't suddenly start collecting islands or commissioning marble statues of myself holding a credit card. Instead, I sat in my apartment, the same two-bedroom place I'd lived in for years, with a cup of coffee, a legal pad, and one big question. Now what? The answer came faster than I expected. I thought about the conversation with Grandma Eleanor, her dream of creating something that would outlive both of us. And I realized she'd already given me the blueprint, the Eleanor Foundation for Adopted Children. Not a vanity project, not a PR stunt, a real, tangible solution for kids like me, the ones who grew up with too many scars and not enough support. The first few weeks were a whirlwind of chaos and caffeine. I assembled a team of lawyers, accountants, social workers, and nonprofit veterans. I told them I didn't just want a charity, I wanted a revolution. We're not handing out Band-Aids, I told them in the first meeting. We're building launch pads. They stared at me like I'd just delivered a TED Talk they didn't sign up for, but they got it. Slowly, the vision started taking shape. We launched with 3 core missions: legal aid for kids navigating the adoption system, scholarships for those aging out of foster care, and emergency housing for teens kicked out of their homes. And because I was feeling a little dramatic, okay, a lot dramatic, I added one more: a mentorship program where successful adoptees could guide the next generation. Because who better to teach them how to survive the system than someone who'd been chewed up and spit out by it? The day we announced the foundation, the media went nuts. Adopted billionaire pledges fortune to help others like him. From family outcast to philanthropic powerhouse. My personal favorite? Lobster bisque billionaire builds a better future. Someone in a newsroom was very proud of that alliteration. And I won't lie, it felt good. Not the headlines or the praise, but the fact that for once, my name was attached to something good. Something real. Something that wasn't just about revenge. But you know what felt even better? The look on my family's faces as their empire crumbled. Oh, I know. I just said this wasn't about revenge. And it wasn't. But karma has a way of sprinkling a little poetic justice into the mix when you're doing the right thing. First came my parents. Their mansion, the one they'd bought with their money, read, mine, was listed for sale. Turns out restitution payments and legal fees add up fast when you've been caught stealing from a trust. My father, once the king of smug retirement plans, was now talking about downsizing. My mother was spotted at a discount grocery store, which would have been fine if she hadn't once declared that people who shop there don't aspire to anything. I laughed so hard when I saw that tabloid photo, I nearly spilled my latte. Then there was Marcus. Oh, poor, golden boy Marcus. His business, the one he ran on charm and inherited money, was tanking. Turns out charm doesn't pay vendors when your accounts are frozen and your reputation is in the gutter. His wife, Clarissa, she jumped ship faster than a rat off a sinking yacht. Rumor had it she tried to sell a tell-all book about life with a manipulative brother-in-law, but publishers weren't biting. The only thing she sold was her dignity, and even that was on clearance. And me? I wasn't gloating. Okay, maybe a little. But mostly, I was too busy to care. The foundation was exploding with growth. Applications poured in from every corner of the country. Kids who'd been written off were now getting college degrees. Teens who'd been sleeping in cars had safe beds and mentors. Families navigating the broken adoption system had lawyers fighting for them. Good lawyers, the kind who didn't bill by the minute and then ghost you halfway through a case. The first time I walked into one of our housing facilities, I had to stop and catch my breath. It was a converted hotel, modern, warm, and filled with kids laughing in the halls. One boy, maybe 15, was sitting at a table sketching superheroes. When he saw me, he grinned. "You're the guy from the news," he said. "The one who told his family to shove it." "Something like that," I said, smiling. "Thanks," he said simply. "For this. For everything." I barely made it back to the car before the tears hit. Because that was the point. Not the headlines. Not the vindication. Not even the billions. It was that kid. And the hundreds like him. And the thousands who would come after. We held a gala 6 months after launching the foundation. A fancy black tie thing my team insisted on because apparently, that's how rich people convince other rich people to part with their money. I hated every second of it. I'd rather have been in jeans and a hoodie at a food drive. But standing on that stage, looking out at a room full of people ready to fund the mission, I realized something. This was bigger than me. This wasn't just about fixing my past. It was about building a future. People always ask me why I'm doing this, I said into the microphone. And the answer is simple. Because someone once took everything from me. My security, my trust, my childhood, and I swore I'd never let that happen to anyone else. If money has any real purpose, it's this. Not power. Not status. Purpose. The applause was thunderous. Somewhere in the back, I swear I saw a reporter wipe away a tear. Or maybe they were just bored. Hard to tell. Of course, not everyone was clapping. My family wasn't invited, but that didn't stop them from trying to crash the party. Marcus sent an email saying we should talk. My mom mailed me a letter. Actual snail mail, like we were living in 1987, apologizing for how things turned out, but also subtly hinting that maybe I could help them get back on their feet. Even Clarissa reached out, pitching a reality show idea where we'd reunite for therapy. I replied to none of them. See, the thing about forgiveness is that it's not about letting people back into your life. It's about reclaiming the space they used to rent in your head for free. And I had officially evicted every single one of them. As for the foundation, it didn't stop with the US. Within a year, we had branches in Canada, the UK, and Australia. We were lobbying for adoption reform, funding psychological counseling for adoptees, and even starting microgrant programs for young adults trying to start businesses. The Eleanor Foundation wasn't just helping kids survive, it was helping them thrive. One afternoon, as I was leaving a board meeting, I paused in the lobby. On the wall was a massive mural of Grandma Eleanor. The artist had captured her perfectly, all fire and grace, and that faint smirk she always wore when she was about to tell someone off. Beneath her portrait were the words she'd told me the night she changed her will. Family is who shows up. I stood there for a long time, staring at those words. Because she was right. My family hadn't shown up. Not when I was 5 and grieving. Not when I was 15 and struggling. Not when I was 25 and trying to build a future from scraps. But I had shown up. And now, I was showing up for kids who needed someone to do the same. I walked out of the building that day with a strange new feeling, peace. Not the fake kind you get after blocking your toxic relatives on social media. Real peace. The kind that comes when you know you've turned your pain into something that matters. And sure, the road ahead was long. There were more kids to help, more battles to fight, more systems to fix. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting against something. I was fighting for something. Grandma used to say, legacy isn't about what you leave behind. It's about what you set in motion. And looking at the foundation, at the lives we were changing, the futures we were shaping, I knew we were just getting started. They had left me with nothing but scars. I turned those scars into purpose. And in the end, that's worth more than every dollar they ever stole. You'd think that after the lawsuits, the headlines, the courtroom beat down, and the whole "we stole your childhood" fund and laughed about it reveal, my family would have had the good sense to disappear quietly into whatever sad little corner of irrelevance they came from. But no, apparently, self-awareness is not a dominant trait in the Renshaw gene pool. Because just when I thought I was finally free of them, just when I'd settled into my new purpose-driven billionaire life, they started popping up again. Like cockroaches. Wealth-sniffing, guilt-wielding, manipulative cockroaches. It started with an email. The subject line read, "We need to talk. Marcus." That was my first red flag. Marcus doesn't need to talk. Marcus needs a favor, which is usually code for, "I've screwed up again and want you to fix it." Against my better judgment, and because I was in a particularly masochistic mood, I opened it. "David," it began. "I know things have been difficult between us, but I was hoping we could put the past behind us. Mom's been struggling with medical bills, Dad's business is failing, and Clarissa left me. I could really use your help right now. Please. For family." I stared at the screen, then laughed so hard I nearly spit out my coffee. For family? Now they were invoking the F word? Where was family when I was paying for their dinners? Where was family when they called me the outsider? Where was family when they drained my adoption trust like it was their personal piggy bank? I typed out a reply, polite, measured, and dripping with just the right amount of salt. "Marcus, I'm so sorry to hear things are difficult. To help, I've decided to donate exactly $600,000, the same amount you and our parents stole from me, to children who actually need it. I'll even put your names on the donation plaque. You're welcome." Then I blocked his number, his email, and his existence. The silence that followed was beautiful. But Marcus was just the opening act. A few days later, my mother called. I didn't answer. Then she texted. Then she emailed. Then she sent a handwritten letter, like we were living in 1894, delivered by courier. It read like a bad Hallmark card. "We all make mistakes. What matters is forgiveness. Let's heal as a family. We all make mistakes. Sure, some people forget to water their plants. Others accidentally use someone else's Netflix account. And then there are those who steal hundreds of thousands of dollars meant for their adopted son and spend 2 decades emotionally abusing him. Potato, potato. The piece de resistance came from my father. He showed up, at my office, without warning, without shame, like we were just 2 normal guys grabbing lunch. My assistant buzzed me. David? There's a Mr. Renshaw here to see you. Tell him I died, I said. She laughed. I didn't. I stepped out into the lobby, and there he was, Gerald Renshaw, still wearing that smug half-smile he used to flash every time he reminded me I should be grateful. Only now, the smile was tighter. Desperate. David, he said, arms open like we were about to reenact a Hallmark reunion special. It's been too long. Not long enough, I replied, folding my arms. What do you want? He sighed, doing his best impression of a regretful father. I know we've made mistakes, but your mother's health isn't good. The stress of all this, it's taking a toll. And Marcus, he's not handling things well. I'm sure the yacht repossession was traumatic, I said. He ignored the jab. I was hoping we could talk. Maybe find a way forward. For the sake of the family. There it was again, family. They kept tossing that word around like it was a get-out-of-jail-free card. I took a step closer, lowered my voice, and said, let me make this perfectly clear. You don't get to torch a bridge for 30 years and then ask me to cross it when you're out of gas. Family isn't about blood. It's about loyalty. And you burned every ounce of that a long time ago. He swallowed hard, clearly not expecting me to come armed with boundaries. We were wrong, he said quietly. We know that now. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive? I smirked. Forgiveness isn't the problem. Access is. And with that, I turned around and walked away. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't look back. I just left him standing there in the lobby, looking small for the first time in his life. But the parade of desperation didn't stop there. Oh no. Clarissa had to get her turn too. Because of course she did. If attention was oxygen, Clarissa was suffocating without it. She posted a long, tear-soaked, open letter on social media, painting herself as the real victim. According to her, I'd ripped a loving family apart, turned a kind grandmother against her own children, and profited from tragedy. The comments section was a masterpiece. My personal favorite was from one guy who wrote, Girl, he didn't rip the family apart. You were just standing too close to the explosion you helped build. Another said, Maybe don't spend stolen money on spa weekends and then cry when karma slaps you. Internet, I owe you a drink. She also tried reaching out directly. A 3-page email that was basically a mix of apology, self-pity, and a subtle pitch for a business venture. I'm launching a lifestyle brand for women going through tough times. Perhaps we could partner. I deleted it before I even got to the second paragraph. The truth is, I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. The rage, the bitterness, the resentment, it had all burned out, leaving behind something colder and stronger, indifference. I didn't hate them. I just didn't care. And that, I realized, was the ultimate power move. Hate still gives someone space in your head. Indifference kicks them out entirely. And yet, despite the ghostly parade of apology attempts, what struck me most wasn't their sudden regret. It was their total lack of self-awareness. None of them ever said, We're sorry we stole from you. None of them said, We're sorry for humiliating you. All they cared about was what they had lost, the money, the power, the image. Their apologies weren't about me. They were about themselves. One night, as I was leaving the Foundation's new headquarters, a sprawling glass and steel building downtown with Eleanor's name etched into the lobby wall, I got one more message. This time, it was a voicemail from Marcus. David, he said, his voice heavy. I get it. We were terrible. But at the end of the day, we're still family. And family helps each other. Please help us. I listened to the message twice. Then I deleted it. And I blocked his number again for good measure. Because here's the thing. Family does help each other. But they also don't use you, betray you, or abandon you when it's convenient. And if the past 3 decades had taught me anything, it's that my family had never been that kind of family. Instead, I channeled that energy into something better. The Foundation had just launched a new scholarship program, one that would fully fund college educations for kids who had been in foster care. And the first round of scholarships? I dedicated them in honor of Gerald, Lillian, Marcus, and Clarissa, not as a tribute, but as poetic justice. Funded by the Renshaw Family Restoration Grant, the plaque read, Transforming Stolen Opportunities into Second Chances. When the press asked why I named it that, I smiled and said, Because even bad choices can lead to good outcomes. The clip went viral. Marcus must have seen it, because a few days later, he sent me one final email that just said, You're cruel. I didn't reply, mostly because he wasn't wrong. But cruelty wasn't my goal. Closure was. And I finally had it. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing their approval. I wasn't trying to prove I was worthy. I wasn't begging for a seat at their table. I had my own table now, one they'd never be invited to sit at again. And honestly, the view was way better from here. It's funny, people think the opposite of love is hate. It's not. The opposite of love is indifference. Hate still cares. Hate still engages. Hate still wants to win. But indifference? Indifference has already won. And that's where I was now, miles beyond hate, floating somewhere in the peaceful, unbothered void of I don't give a damn. The ghosts of my past had come crawling back, hands out, apologies rehearsed, stories rewritten. But I didn't need their remorse. I didn't need their approval. I didn't even need their acknowledgement. Because the truth was simple, they needed me, and I no longer needed them. And that, right there, was the sweetest victory of all. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I've never really liked cold food. Lukewarm? Meh. Room temperature? Gross. But revenge served with a perfect cup of coffee on a Monday morning, with sunlight pouring into my corner office and peace humming quietly in the background, now that's a dish I'll order every damn day. It's been a year since the Belmont's dinner, the night my life imploded and reassembled itself into something infinitely better. A year since the jokes, the betrayal, the courtroom circus, and Grandma Eleanor's final, glorious mic drop from beyond the grave. 12 months, 52 weeks, 365 days of turning scars into stepping stones. And let me tell you, it's amazing how quickly you stop caring about revenge when you're too busy living a life that makes your enemies sick just thinking about it. I was standing in the lobby of the Eleanor Foundation's new headquarters, a gleaming, glass-walled monument to second chances, when it hit me how far I'd come. The place was buzzing. Volunteers moved briskly through the halls. Kids laughed in the rec room. Lawyers met with families in our legal aid center, and a group of new scholarship recipients toured the dorm-style housing facility upstairs. On the main wall, a portrait of Grandma Eleanor watched over it all. That same mischievous smirk, that same unspoken told you so. Big day today, said Marissa, my chief operating officer, appearing beside me with a stack of reports. We're announcing the National Mentorship Program this afternoon. Cameras, press, the works. Good, I said. Let's make sure they spell Eleanor right this time. Last time someone wrote Eleanor, and I almost committed a felony. She laughed. Already taken care of. Also, your 9 o'clock is waiting. Send them in, I said, adjusting my jacket. My 9 o'clock was a kid named Andre, 17, tall, quiet, and recently aged out of the foster care system. He'd applied for one of our scholarships, and today I was meeting him to talk about mentorship. You nervous? I asked when he walked in. A little, he admitted. Good, I said. That means you care. Nervous is good. Nervous gets things done. He smiled, and we talked for nearly an hour. About college. About dreams. About how he'd always wanted to study engineering, but didn't think someone like him could. By the end of the meeting, he had a scholarship, a mentor, and, judging by the look on his face, something even more valuable, hope. After he left, I sat back and stared out the window. Down below, the city pulsed with life. Somewhere out there, my family was probably watching the news and grinding their teeth. Marcus was probably dodging bill collectors. Clarissa was likely trying to sell healing crystals on Instagram. My parents were probably complaining about how ungrateful I was over dinner they couldn't afford. And me? I was changing lives. There's a certain poetry to that, isn't there? They spent years trying to convince me I was worthless, and now I was building something priceless. They told me I'd never amount to anything, and now I was running an organization that mattered. They tried to break me, and all they did was build the fire that keeps me going. It's funny, though. People still ask me if I hate them. They assume I lie awake at night plotting their downfall, like some billionaire Batman with mommy issues. But the truth is, I don't hate them. I don't feel anything for them. Hate requires effort. Hate takes energy, and I'd rather spend that energy helping people who deserve it. That's the real secret to revenge. It's not about watching the people who wronged you suffer. It's about building a life so rich, so joyful, so untouchable that their suffering becomes irrelevant. I learned that lesson the day Marcus tried one last time to reach me. He sent a letter. Handwritten, dramatic, full of I'm sorry, S, and we were wrong, S, and please let us make amends. I didn't respond. Instead, I put the letter in a drawer and went to a fundraiser for foster care reform. That night, we raised $12 million. Marcus never got a reply. That's how you win. The best revenge isn't a courtroom victory. It isn't a snarky comeback. It isn't even a billion-dollar inheritance. It's sipping your coffee on a Tuesday morning while the people who underestimated you realize they no longer matter. It's living in peace while they drown in the consequences of their own choices. Later that afternoon, I walked through the foundation halls, greeting staff and volunteers. One of our legal aid lawyers waved me over. "We just won another case," she said, grinning. 16-year-old girl. She's getting adopted by the family she's been with for 2 years. I grinned back. That's the good stuff. Every success story like that reminded me why I was here. Every scholarship awarded, every legal victory, every kid who got a second chance. It was all part of a larger story. And not just mine. Ours. Grandma's legacy. The kids' futures. The lives we were rewriting every day. On my way out, I stopped by the memorial garden we'd built for Eleanor. A quiet, sun-dappled courtyard with her favorite roses and a small plaque that read, "For every child who was told they weren't enough, you are." I sat on the bench and talked to her, like I often did. "You were right," I said. "Living well really is the best revenge." The wind rustled the leaves like she was laughing at me. I stayed there for a while, thinking about the road that had brought me here, the dinner at Belmont's, the humiliation, the betrayal, the courtroom battles, the painful goodbyes. All of it had led to this moment. And as much as it had hurt, as much as I sometimes wished it had gone differently, I wouldn't change a single thing. Because without the storm, I never would have found the calm. That night, I went home to my apartment. Yes, still the same apartment, because money doesn't change who you are, it just gives you options. I made dinner, poured a glass of wine, and sat on my balcony, watching the city lights stretch out before me. Somewhere out there, my family was still angry, still bitter, still blaming me for a mess they created. And somewhere in the building across the street, a kid I'd helped through the foundation was studying for college classes he never thought he'd take. That's the scoreboard that matters. And here's the thing no one tells you about revenge. It stops being about them the moment you start living for you. I used to dream about payback, about rubbing my success in their faces, about making them beg for forgiveness. But now, I don't care if they're watching. I don't care if they're jealous. I don't care if they ever understand what they lost. Their opinions are as worthless to me as their apologies. I'm too busy living, too busy laughing, too busy building, too busy being happy. And if that happiness also happens to make them miserable, well, that's just the cherry on top. A few weeks later, we held a dedication ceremony for the Foundation's newest project, a national resource center for adoptees and foster youth. The governor showed up. So did senators, business leaders, and celebrities. Cameras flashed, speeches were made. And when it was my turn at the podium, I looked out at the crowd and smiled. When I was a kid, I used to think family was about blood, about names, about who was in the room when you were born. But I've learned that family isn't about who shares your DNA. It's about who shows up. And this place, this foundation, is proof of that. It's proof that we are not defined by what's been taken from us, but by what we choose to build in its place. The applause was thunderous. And somewhere, maybe watching from a couch, maybe doom-scrolling through social media, I knew my family was seeing this too. And I hoped they understood. They hadn't just lost money. They'd lost me. As I stepped off the stage, one of the kids we'd helped ran up and hugged me. "Thank you," he said, "for everything." I knelt down, meeting his eyes. "No," I said. "Thank you. Because you're the reason I do this." And that was the truth. Revenge might have started this journey, but love, messy, imperfect, stubborn love, is what kept it going. Love for the kids who needed someone. Love for the mission. And, yeah, love for myself. The version of me who'd survived it all. So no, I don't hate my family. I don't wish them harm. I don't even think about them most days. Because they're not my story anymore. They're just a chapter. A dark one, sure, but necessary. And my story? It's still being written. Page by page. Day by day. Victory by victory. They left me with nothing but scars. I turned those scars into empires. And in the end, that's not revenge. That's justice, with a side of peace, a dash of purpose, and a generous sprinkle of sarcasm. And honestly, it's the most delicious dish I've ever tasted.